And I have the pleasure of moderating today's panel, in part because of my relationship with two sponsor organizations. I'm a board member with the American Constitution Society's Columbus Lawyers Chapter, and I also am currently serving in the capacity as the Ohio representative for Represent Us. ACS, or the American Constitution Society, believes that law should be a force to improve the lives of all people and brings together many of the country's sharpest legal minds for positive change by shaping debate on vitally important legal and constitutional issues while nurturing the next generation of lawyers and judges and others within the legal community. Represent Us is the nation's largest grassroots anti-corruption organization that brings together everyone from within the political spectrum to focus on the issue of corruption in our political system. This national work includes the South Dakota Anti-Corruption Amendment that's going to appear on the ballot for South Dakota voters this November. If you're not familiar with it, it was modeled from the suggestion of the Illinois Bar Association, and it will create the strongest ethics commission in our country that also includes ethics for the judicial branch of government. It requires a judge to disqualify himself or herself in any proceeding in which monetary or in-kind support related to the judge's election or retention creates an appearance of bias to a reasonable person. I'm very honored to serve as the moderator for today's lunchtime panel, and we're going to begin by having some of our judges give 10-minute remarks. And then after that, I'll provide some moderated questions, and then we'll open it up to a broader question and answer period from the audience. We ask that you reserve any questions that you may have. Go ahead and write them down. We'll get to them at the end. So first, to introduce our judges, I'd like to invite up former state senator and president of the Ohio Conference NAACP, Tom Roberts. And then after him, Louise McKinney, a retired attorney and law professor from the Cleveland area, who is an active leader and organizer with the Greater Cleveland Congregations, who is also another organization sponsoring today's event. Tom, take it away.
Thank you. One of the panelists is Municipal Court Judge Cindi Morehart. Judge Morehart attended the Ohio State School of Law, her Juris Doctorate at Capital University Law School, attended the Ohio State Bachelor's Degree in Education, a magistrate from the Franklin County Domestic Relations Court, assistant city prosecutor for Columbus, for the city of Columbus, as well as a current, that's what she is, serves as the current bench of Franklin County Municipal Court, I guess with a specialty in the area of mental health. She has been successful at getting a grant to carry on this work at the local level. So one of our panelists is the Honorable Cindi Morehart from
Hi. As we went through the court things this morning, I realized what an impact Loving versus Virginia had on me, because I was married in 1966 to an African-American man from Georgia, and Loving versus Virginia didn't happen until 1967. So I just wanted to point out that there are impacts here. So I am a leader of Greater Cleveland Congregations, which is a powerful force for change, creating justice and opportunity in Greater Cleveland by uniting our faith communities and civic partners across lines of race, class, and religion. And one major focus we have had since our founding has been around mass incarceration and stopping the mass incarceration, particularly of minorities and minority men. And we've been doing that in a number of ways related to voting, relating to the courts, and kind of expanding. So we've been very active in voter registration, get out the vote. We've also had forums for candidates, for instance, prosecutor candidates. And as a result of that and our work and others, for the first time, I think, in recorded history, an incumbent prosecutor in Cuyahoga County was voted out. And we had established a relationship with the new prosecutor who is working with us to develop initiatives around preventing mass incarceration. And in regards to that as well, we have been working on, with the courts, those who have been elected, to get them to be working together. And in regards to that, I'm happy to introduce Judge Ronald Adrine, who is from Cleveland and has been a leader in dealing with aspects of mass incarceration in Cuyahoga County, and another Clevelander, I might add. Judge Ronald Adrine has been judge of the Cleveland Municipal Court for 36 years and administrative and presiding judge for 9 years. He's recently retired from the bench, but not before. He instituted a system of bail reform in the Cleveland Municipal Court that is an example. Now, we talked about what organizations do judges or candidates participate in. Well, examples of positions he has held with approximately 70 professional, civic, and social organizations are his work with the Ohio Supreme Court. And those include the Ohio Commission on Racial Fairness, the Ohio Supreme Court's Interpreter Services Advisory Committee, the Ohio Supreme Court's Criminal Sentencing Commission's Ad Hoc Committee on Bail and Pretrial Services. Plus, he's been the chair of Cuyahoga County Election Review Panel, co-chair of the National Judicial Institute on Domestic Violence, on the board of directors of the National Center for State Courts and its National Task Force on Fines, Fees, and Bails. His honors are many. I'm not going to read them all, but you get the idea, right? So Judge Ronald Adrine is a thinker and he's a doer. I know that we all look forward to his thoughtful observations and challenges on how to make Ohio's courts more fair.
And now we're going to invite up each of our judges to give individual remarks of 10 minutes. So Judge Morehart, would you like to start us off?
Good afternoon, everyone. It's such a pleasure to be here and meet all of you. So I just want to say thank you for all of you for coming out. It's a great turnout and it's a great venue to start talking about these things if you haven't in the past, and if you have, to get your ideas across, share them with others so that they can take those things back to their communities and talk to people. One of the things that we were talking about is why is it important for you all to know who I am, who Judge Adrine is, and what we do. Because it affects you, it truly affects you every single day. Both of us are part of the municipal court system. And one of the things I heard in the comments earlier was you need to know the difference in the different courts. Very, very true. Municipal court is where you are likely to be, each and every one of you. You may think court doesn't matter. You're in a traffic accident, you get subpoenaed to court, you need to know what you're looking at. What does it mean to you? Are you required to be there? How long is it going to take? What does that case mean in terms of your rights? What if you can't collect damages? All of those things. You need to know what that court is about because it does affect you. A panhandler on the street that gets too aggressive. It affects you, and that's the kinds of cases we hear. Domestic violence cases, operating a vehicle while impaired, and a host of other things, including one of our biggest epidemics, the drug addiction issues that are out there. We deal with those things every single day. They land in our laps and we have to deal with them. I've lost so many people. It is such a tragedy, and I'm here to tell you our court works very hard at combating these issues So it is important for you to be able to ask those questions. What are you all doing to protect us, to protect our communities? Because you deal with the everyday people in our communities every single day. So that's one of the things I want to say to you, and I'm hoping that I won't go on about my passion for dealing with the mentally ill in our court systems and our justice systems. I do preside over a specialized mental health court docket that's overseen by the Supreme Court of Ohio, which I'm very passionate about and could go on for hours, so I will shut up now. But thank you all for being here.
Good afternoon. And thank you for asking me to come. I appreciate it. I tell people when I come to Columbus, I've come to Columbus so many times now that it just seems like a long street.
That's 71 south and north.
It's 71 south and north, yeah. I was wondering if I could get somebody to put the screen up that I guess Karen had, that had the 5 or so questions on it real quick, because I think that that's a better screen.
There it is.
There you go.
Oh.
Thank you. It really is a better screen for me to talk about the issues that you're concerned about than the one that I was going to use, so I thought I'd go that way. When you start looking at this from the standpoint of why is it important to know about the courts, frequently when I was on the bench and I would go out and talk to the public, I would suggest to them that they really needed to pay more attention to what they did with their votes as it related to the judiciary. You have to understand that in a state like Ohio, which has jealously guarded its right to vote for judges, that there is, generally speaking, in every election where there are judicial candidates on the bench, which is basically every election, a 40% drop-off from the top of the ticket to the judges. So that means it's not even about getting people to the polls. We're talking about the people who get to the polls may vote for president, or may vote for governor, or may vote for mayor, but they don't vote for the individuals who are down at the bottom of the ticket, generally speaking, which are the judicial officers. I want you to think about this for a second. What other public official does the public give the power and the authority to take their property, their liberty, and in some instances, even their life? What other one do they give that authority to? I'd suggest that there is no other one. They do that for judges. And yet and still, when they go into the judicial ballot and make that decision, many of them make the decision for the most inane, inept, inconsequential reasons. Adrine. Yeah, I've seen that name before. I'll put my X there. Ron, oh yeah, that means he's a man. Yeah. I'll vote for him there. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, I saw his poster. Yeah, he's a black man. I'll put the X there. Okay. Let's see, what's it? O'Malley. Yeah, that's a good name. I know that other judges are named O'Malley, so I'll just vote for him because of that. What does any of that have to do with whether or not that person is going to be a good judge? Okay. I say all that, and I'm casting aspersions on the electorate, but I kind of understand why it comes down to that. Let's look at kind of the history of things. Over the course of the last 60, 70 years, we've chosen as a society to remove civic education from the curriculums of our schools. Who made that call? Because what it really has done is it's dumbed down the electorate. People don't have even the thought that they need to have more education because it was never valued for them. Their parents didn't get it. Their grandparents may have gotten it, okay? But it's a sense that they never saw any of it when they came to school. So if we start from there, then we kind of start to get an idea as to why it is that people don't even know what they don't know. Okay? And why they vote the way that they do. In order for an individual to really be informed as it relates to a judicial candidate, what would they really have to do? Well, in Cleveland, just on the common pleas court bench alone, not even talking about the municipal court in the city of Cleveland or the municipal courts, because there's 12 of them in the rest of the county, not talking about the Court of Appeals, not talking about the Supreme Court, just on the common pleas court of the city of Cleveland, you have 75 judges. Okay? That's over 5 divisions. You know, you have, in addition to the general division, you also have the probate division, you have the domestic relations division, you have the juvenile court, all of those different divisions of the court. And so in order for a person to really be able to cast an informed vote, they would have to know when they go in what the record of each one of those judges was. And really and truly, having the record of the judge in front of you, having their history, having their experience, really still doesn't inform you as to whether or not you should vote for that judge. I could be a perfect person on paper as far as my experience. I might have spent time as a prosecuting attorney and then turned around and spent some time as a criminal defense lawyer. I could have worked for Congress. I could have spent some time, working in some kind of a governmental office. I could have all of the right credentials. But that doesn't mean that I have the right people skills to be passing judgment on other people. I know, and I'm going to say it, and I'll probably get in trouble. But I know some people who are currently on the bench and people who've been on the bench in the past that I wouldn't give you the powder it would take to blow them straight to hell. Because they weren't good individuals. They had biases. They had ego. They had entitlement that caused them to come to the conclusion that they were better than the people who were appeared in front of them. And that's not the person that you want on the bench. But how would you know that? Unless you came down to the courthouse with your little list of, let's see, who's up for election this year? Okay, I'm going to go spend a day this week, next week, and the week after next, because I don't want to just take the chance that I catch somebody on a good day or a bad day. And I'm going to spend that time sitting in the back of that courtroom, which all of you, of course, have the right to do because all of the courts in this state are open. Sit in the back of that courtroom, and I'm going to watch this judge and see how this judge interacts with not only just the people who appear as defendants and the people who appear as plaintiffs or prosecutors, but how that individual interacts with their staff and how they interact with the other people who come into the courtroom. I want to see how this person is as a person so I can tell what kind of a judge they're likely to be. Who's going to put in that kind of time? Nobody. So then you have to rely upon surrogates, okay? So you have maybe the Bar Association, you know, because they're in and out of the courtrooms all the time. At least some of them are. Because as somebody at the table I was sitting at pointed out, about 80% of the lawyers don't have courtroom practices. So when you have bar associations voting on a particular judge, they may be in the same position as a layperson as it relates to their knowledge. They're going on what somebody else told them. So it's difficult for you to be able to choose and select, you know, what is it that a particular judicial candidate has going for them that should earn your vote. And that's not to say that you shouldn't do everything that you can to learn as much as you can about a judge. Most judges will not tell you how they're going to vote on a particular issue. They're just not going to do it. And you can ask around it. You can talk to people who may have appeared in front of them. You can do a lot of other kinds of things to get some information, but the one thing that you should not do is just go in there and just mark somewhere, you know, on the ballot. And the other thing that you shouldn't do is to go in and neglect the judicial part of the ballot. So you need to do the homework to be able to get to the point where you can make and cast an intelligent vote.
We're going to move on. Great segue. I'm a very type A moderator. But this concept of getting to know your judicial candidates as people, getting to learn a little bit more about their experiences, that's part of what our goal with these focused and prepared questions is going to be, is to learn a little bit more from the folks we have here in the room and what they've learned in their time on the bench, as well as what they think is important for the electorate to know in the judicial branch of our government. So for both of you, what ultimately inspired you to serve in this capacity?
I'm going to take a long story and try to make it short, especially since I have a type A model. Really what it comes down to is I was practicing law. I was in the practice with my dad, so I was really pretty much kind of fat, dumb, and happy. How much better does it get than that? One day we went to court to deal with a situation that he was facing where somebody had, a gentleman who had mental health problems had basically been stalking him. And my dad didn't want to see the man put in jail, but he did want him to get some help. We went in front of a particular judge, and my dad stepped up to try to explain that that was the situation and asked that the judge refer the gentleman to a place where he could get that kind of help. And the judge reared back in his chair and crossed his arms over his chest, looked at my dad and said, "What do I look like, some kind of social worker?" Ooh. Everybody who had come in that courtroom that day had gotten basically the same kind of treatment, so I guess you could say he was an equal opportunity abuser. But when I walked out of there, I concluded, I said, you know, this guy doesn't have the temperament to do this job. And I really ran more as a protest than anything else because I was good at practicing law. And when I put my hat in the ring, much to my surprise, people were coming out of the woodwork asking me, you know, what could they do to help? And so it suddenly dawned on me, oh, shoot, I could actually win. and as it turned out, I won by about 10,000 votes. Having won, I determined, you know, now that I had this job, that I needed to really give a lot of thought as to how the job should be done, and you know, I looked at the way that other people that I had appeared in front of had conducted themselves. I took some from column A, some from column B, rejected some from column C, and put together a judicial philosophy.
Well, I started off, as you heard, I have a degree in education, and so I waited 12 years between graduating from college and going to law school. I was a teacher for juvenile prison. for the Department of Youth Services. I'm so interested and intrigued by the girls that I taught and their lives and the crimes that have brought them to where they were, and the reactions of the judges in their communities about you can never return to my community and some things like that, that I got so interested in the legal aspects of it that I decided I just had to go to law school. And while it took a little while for me to get started, as a single mom with an 8-year-old son, I decided to go to law school, got accepted, worked full-time, went to law school full-time, my own mental health issues, and made it through in 3 years. Became a prosecutor for 10 years, both in municipal court, where I am on the bench now, and for the county prosecutor's office, and I was a senior prosecutor in juvenile. So I spent 20 years in juvenile court, 7 as a prosecutor, 13 on the bench there. And brought to it my own style. I have my own personality, and I don't do well fitting into a little box. And I don't believe in a cookie cutter approach, which was one of the things I found out when I was teaching these young, because I had all girls. So when I was teaching my girls, is that a cookie cutter approach for trying to help someone and work with their problems never works. Everyone comes from a different place, and everyone needs something different. And it became my job to figure out what it was that I needed. And I love that job. Can't imagine thinking any other way. And so when I looked at leaving the bench in juvenile and running for municipal court, I looked at the trends of our court system, which I found interesting when you all talk about the trends of the court system, because it's none of the things that I think of in our court system at all. What I saw was many judges that were just like you described, but they were leaving and being replaced with a new personality and a new style and a new thought process, and that was looking at the individual in front of us. Not you're all the same and I'm gonna treat you all the same and you get a $100 fine and you get a $100 fine and you get a $100 fine. No, what is it that you need then? What is it that you need? And what different thing do you need? And our court as a whole, including our probation department, which over the last couple of years, since I've taken the bench, and it's not just me, we have 15 judges, but we're all getting on board with this, which is an incredible thing. We've been changing even our probation department to look at things differently and to look at our clients, the people we serve, differently. We've managed to put together an incredible pretrial, probation pretrial division that starts to deal with the big issues, the underlying issues, before they're even adjudicated. And to get the people what they need, to get them out of our system. While I adore all people that appear in front of me, and God knows I've got plenty of them, I would love to have a few less. So what we want to do, I mean, it's much like the medical field. You put a Band-Aid on something, but you know, what's underneath that Band-Aid? What's the reason that it got there in the first place? So we're not looking to put a Band-Aid on anything. We're trying to approach it that we need to find out what the cause is, what the real illness is, and let's see what we can do to help that individual deal with that. And that's the trend that I see. That's why I wanted to be a part of it. And there you have it.
What I really identified with Judge Morehart in terms of some of the comments you just said is this concept of underlying issues for each individual who's being adjudicated. And you identified that as a trend, and much of what we're talking about are trends and values with respect to the judiciary. And I'm really interested in some of your thoughts on current threats or challenges to some of this progress you see the bench making, and how your experience has been in handling some of those.
We're living in really difficult times from a judicial standpoint. I'm sure that everybody heard that Justice Kennedy has indicated his intention to step down and to step down quite soon, within a month. That means that the current President of the United States will have had his second appointment to the U.S. Supreme Court. There's at least one and maybe two more justices on the Supreme Court who were in their 80s. It is possible, if not likely, that one or the other of them might also step down. Their replacements are not just conservative, they are very conservative, if not radical, if not reactionary. Regardless of what you would believe as a judicial officer the law should be, the guidance that you have to take comes from the U.S. Supreme Court. And so the trend that I see is that over the course of the last 20 to 25 years, out of 17 Supreme Court nominations, 13 of those have been made by Republicans. What that means is that the court has continuously been either center-right or further right, and it's about to move even further right than that. That in turn, as a trend, means that things that are important to me, and I made a little list so I wouldn't forget, such as abortion rights, voting rights, labor rights, environmental rights, gay rights, school prayer, gun control, affirmative action, corporate money, political money, mass incarceration, police misconduct, housing, both public and private, education, and civil rights is likely to end up in a Supreme Court that will be hostile to expanding those rights and will be looking at the probability and the possibility of retarding. I think that that's the most significant trend that we're seeing as a nation, and the one that's going to be the hardest for us to deal with.
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned the United States Supreme Court. There's obviously a relationship between all of our branches of government as well as all of our levels of government, local, state, federal. Can you describe a little bit of your experience as local judges and how that intertwines with our Ohio Supreme Court, as well as what you described as the jealously guarded right to vote for judges? You know, we're talking a little bit about this appointment process at the national level, but we get to elect our state folks, and there's still a heavy conservative lead. Can you talk a little bit about that relationship on the local level?
Well, whether you believe in electing judges or appointing judges, it's, you know, I hate the election process. I gotta be perfectly honest, I'm campaigning. I'm very, very happy about that. Now all I need to do is just work, because it is a very insincere process to some degree. I mean, part of my job was to go out and make sure people knew my name. So when they pressed those buttons, they went, oh, I remember her name. Oh, you know, I like redheads, I like whatever. It is a silly process. We try as candidates to get our views out, to tell people what we're about, what we've done in our lives, what our actions have been, because I think that says everything about who you are and what's important to us. As I said, in my case, I'm very passionate about our defendants that are mentally ill, which are more than a majority in that court. But that's not what voters take away. We've learned that over studies over the years. there are a handful of people that really do pay attention, and for all of you who are the kinds of people that look into things, thank you. But there are just so many that don't. Some will take the time to ask their neighbors who are lawyers. You know, my friend is a lawyer, I ask them. That's oftentimes helpful, but so many people get there and say, oh yeah, I saw that 15-second commercial because that taught you so much about me, right? And yeah, I liked her hair, I didn't like her hair, so I'm gonna vote for the other guy. It's that simple, and that's a tragedy. That is really a tragedy. And I've seen that as a trend over many, many years. Not seen it change. That bothers me a lot. That's like I said, well, I'm happy to see so many people here because that indicates that maybe that is a trend. I would hope so. I didn't see enough of it last year when I was out on the campaign trail to think that yet. But I'm very hopeful that it will change. Your concern about our Supreme Court makeup concerns us all. Our personal views, which we don't espouse often as judicial officers. Partially because you need to know that we need to go in knowing that our personal views don't always matter. Because we do have to follow the law. Now, our Supreme Court of Ohio is what governs us on a state level. When they say this is how you're going to rule under this set of facts, that's what I'm going to decide. That's the way I'm going to decide. That is my job, to follow the law. And believe me, their law is binding on us as a lower court. So it's very important that I know what goes on up there. On a more personal note for me, one of the trends that we have in Ohio, and I'm very proud of this trend, is the specialty dockets that we have. Over half of the counties in Ohio now have specialty courts of some kind. We are the largest specialty docket department in Ohio, and because we're here in Columbus with the Supreme Court, and a lot of the people that work in that department of the Supreme Court are people that have come from our court, so we know them very well and have worked with them over the years. So we have a really close relationship with them. We're really lucky. We have 5 different specialty dockets. Mental health is the oldest. That's what I deal with. It was the original, and we go out, we promote it. People can donate to it. We don't ask for money, but there are ways that people can do that. They can volunteer and be a part of it. State organizations are starting to loosen up and do pilot projects with us and give us money. We have managed to address medically assisted treatment for opiate addictions. And now with the help of this grant that I recently got from the state, we are able to deal with treating psychotic episodes, treating mentally ill defendants while they're in jail with antipsychotics so that we can stabilize them before they get on the street. Our goal is not to incarcerate them. Mentally ill, I will tell you, spend much more time in jail than people who do not suffer from mental illness. And our goal is to change that. That has been a trend over the years. It's unfortunately still a trend. So those are some of the things that we are working on, and we work very closely with the state because they govern what we do in those dockets. We have to get certified and recertified every 3 years. Our programs are certified. The judge that presides is certified. They want to make sure that it's a certain kind of outlook that you have on life and folks in front of you. It's a certain kind of temperament. And we have a model that we have to follow, and they want to make sure that we know what it is we're doing in that field and following that model. So it's best to help our folks.
I wanted to add too, just like we're governed by the Ohio Supreme Court, there are intermediate courts of appeals that are spread across the state. 12 intermediate courts of appeals. And within the jurisdiction of that Court of Appeals, whatever decision that court makes is binding on all the trial courts that serve in that jurisdiction. So not only do you have to be concerned about what the Supreme Court is saying as it relates to it, but you have to also be concerned with what the Courts of Appeals are saying. And, of course, the Courts of Appeals have to adhere to what the Supreme Court says. So the trial court can make a decision. The Court of Appeals could say, yeah, you're all wet. That was a bad decision. The parties could appeal to the Ohio Supreme Court, and the Ohio Supreme Court could say, no, the trial court was right, and the Court of Appeals was all wet. The litigants could decide that they didn't like that decision either. They could then attempt to go either through the federal court system, starting at the district court, which is the trial court in the federal system, and they could get a contrary decision there. They could still disagree. They could go to the federal court of appeals. They could get that reversed again, and then if they were lucky, they could then have the U.S. Supreme Court decide that they were going to take that case up and could say, you're all wrong, and make a decision that was, decided on something entirely different. So there are lots of layers of review that each decision can possibly go through, but most of them never get much further than the trial court making a decision. And possibly, if you appeal, they go into the Court of Appeals. The majority of our decisions are made at the trial court level, and the majority of decisions that are made, both civil and criminal, are made at our level, the municipal court, because we handle the highest volume cases.
You both on two different occasions mentioned this concept of personal views and that conflict with the judiciary and the oath of office that you take. Amidst our office, we have so many different types of interest represented. We have charities, nonprofit, attorneys, clergy, office holders, and former judges. It's really interesting to me, this concept of being a person, having to get elected, trying to get a public to buy into you, and with that also comes in the concept of money and financial support in order to get elected, and then having an independent judiciary. So can you talk a little bit about judicial independence, that role of bias, and how the public can be a little bit more involved in terms of protecting the independence of our judiciary?
Well, obviously we all have personal views. I mean, we're all individuals and believe in certain things, and other certain things upset us. What you need to learn as voters is that going to play in any way to what I do every day? Obviously, my personality, my views, how I treat people, things like that are going to matter. It is going to matter how I treat people every single day. So those are very important things to consider, but the legal aspects of it, if I happen to think prostitution ought to be legal, how am I going to work on those cases every day? Because we hear those every day. That's important for you to know is, does my view on a particular subject impact what I'm going to do on the bench in terms of ruling on those cases? And when you have new people, that have never been on the bench before, it's very tough. When I ran, fortunately, I'd been on the bench as a magistrate for 13 years, so I had a track record on the bench. So people had something that they could look at concrete and say, now you just follow the law every single time here. It may be a different court, but you follow the law every time. I'm thinking you're going to do it again. So that was good, but it's really difficult to make that determination when you're looking at somebody as a candidate if they're brand new. They've got a track record, you've got to look at it. You've got to know where their biases are. People will not be honest about their biases, especially when they're running for office. the law is you cannot run for a judicial office unless you've been practicing for 6 years. I think 50 years that I forget. So you gotta look at what did they do over those 6 years and how did they do it. And so you really have to pay attention and do your homework.
Yeah. You know, I mean, it's really interesting. I mean, when I first ran for judge, I had been out of law school for 8 years, which means that's pretty quick. You know, I was pretty and I had, but during that 8 years, I had served as an assistant county prosecutor. I had served as a criminal defense lawyer in a general practice where I had all kinds of civil experience, and I had worked for Congress, you know, for a period of about 10 months on the U.S. House of Representatives Select Committee on Assassinations. So I had a level of experience all compressed into that 8 years. But you know, there were people who ran for a judge in Cleveland who ran at the point that they got more than 5 years, which is what the law requires. And the only thing they had going for them was the fact that their last name was Gallagher. And they won. Or Corbin. And they won. So I'm saying, you know, the need for the people to really know what they're doing when you put somebody in office is very, very great. And yet still, their ability to get the information they need to get them past that, because implicit bias is in all of us. We all have it. Okay? And you need to have somebody who is able to put that off to the side, to be able to say, you know, I feel this way about that, but this is what the law requires, and I'm going to follow the law. If you really are a person of conscience, there might come a point in time where you would conclude that what you're being asked to do offends your conscience in such a way that the only appropriate action for you to do would be to take resignation for the bench. And I hope that there are people out there who are willing to do that, but then I hope they're replaced by people who have the same kind of conscience.
I like that. You know, Judge Adrine, during your initial remarks that I rudely cut off, you mentioned something that really struck me, both as an attorney, a voter, and somebody who's really interested in good government reforms. You mentioned that the judicial office is unique in our electorate in that it's one of the only that allows an individual to take away another person's property, liberty, and life. And that really, really struck with me. And I'll use this as our closing question before I open it up to the audience. But, you know, more broadly, why do courts matter? Why do they matter?
You know, I mean, courts are put in place in order to get us out of the primitive notion that disputes should be resolved by who happens to be the strongest. I mean, you know, you've had various conflict resolution things over history. You know, there was at the time of the Salem witch trials where they dumped people in water, if in fact they floated and they were guilty, you know. Or you had trial by combat where people duked it out and whoever happened to win, they obviously were the person who was right. So this is our civilized dispute resolution process is based upon rules. But in order for it to be effective, people have to have confidence that the playing field is even and that the arbiter is fair. Okay? If not, then why is there any reason for anybody to follow the court's rules? We go back to I'll take it to the street.
We'll figure it out on our own. Thanks. Exactly. He's absolutely right. Couldn't have said it better.
Wonderful. Well, with that, we have just over 20 minutes or so, unless we want to catch up on our agenda. But we have about 20 minutes so we can open it up to audience questions. I'll just try my best to funnel them, so we'll start over here.
Well, I thank the panelists, and I really appreciate it. I got a question for Judge Adrine. You talked about what the moderator also piggybacked on, which is this, I call it judicial discretion. And when I was in law school, we understood it to be one of the greatest powers, if not the greatest power, in our democracy today. And so when you talk about judicial discretion and the rights that judges have, almost unfettered, I'd like for you to describe that a little more, and I'd also like you to describe ways in which that discretion is abused, because there seems to be a lot of abuse of judicial discretion that I'm seeing coming through the court system now. So if you could maybe comment on that for a moment.
Let me start off by saying that I believe that the vast majority of the judicial officers are there because of the fact that they sought the office to do the right thing and to do good on behalf of not only themselves but also the community that they serve. That they see it as an opportunity for service. When you're talking about judicial discretion, you're talking about situations where the judge has to weigh into the gray area, okay? Where it's not, clear cut one way or the other. A decision has to be made as to whether or not the case should be decided in favor of one party or the other based upon the totality of the circumstances. That decision is necessarily going to be colored by the level of that judge's education, that judge's experience, really the climate that the case is decided on, the courage of that judicial officer under whatever the circumstances have to be, and a plethora of other kinds of things that come into play.
That implicit bias you were talking about.
And implicit bias is one of those things.
Yes.
Now, of course, implicit bias is something that, by its very nature, means that you don't even know that you have it. Okay? And so I teach a course to new judges school every fall and every spring on access to fairness. And what we try to get over to the people who come to attend that course is their need to become aware of the fact that they have these biases.
Yes, yes.
And to try to always be vigilant to combat those biases so that they don't taint the decisions that they make.
Yes.
Now, some people are going to be more successful at that than others. You're going to see it play out. Some people won't try to do anything with it at all. They're just going to let their bias ride.
Yes.
You're going to see that play out.
Yes.
But I would suggest to you that it's been my experience over time that the vast majority of judicial officers that I've encountered over the 36 years that I've been on the bench do their level best to make the best decisions they possibly can, given the information that they have in front of them and their understanding of the law that applies.
Thank you.
I'll start in back and then come up here.
You mentioned, as voters, we need to do our best to look at somebody's judge's track record. So my question is, how will you do that? Do their decisions get overturned by higher
And
courts?
obviously, yes. You can go online and look up a judge's name to find out decisions that they've been talked about that they've made, and see whether or not the Court of Appeals has upheld their decisions or overruled their decisions, as well as the Supreme Court. If there's if there's a number of decisions, you could maybe look at the track record. How many times are they being overturned? Does that mean they're not following the law? Things like that. It was mentioned you could go sit and watch. And I invite people to my courtroom for everything, anytime. And it is an open courtroom. And there are people in the community, there are a number of retired people that are court watchers. And they go to court every day. And they watch judges in all the different courts in the county to just keep a handle on whether or not they are doing the right thing. So,
the establishment of a good court watch program in any community is, from my perspective, a great thing. In Hennepin County and Minneapolis have one of the best court watch programs that I've ever seen. It was really organized. They really knew what they were doing. They knew how, what kinds of questions they wanted to ask, what kind of observations they wanted to make. And those kind of things then can be put out to the public so the public can become aware of what particular judicial officers are doing. I gotta tell you, and I'd be telling an untruth if I said it was not true. If I know somebody's watching me, I am a whole lot more careful about what I do than when I don't think that there's anybody paying attention.
That's human nature. That's not.
Why I put on makeup today.
If nobody's gonna see, you know. And the same thing, you know, with regard to, you know, a lot of court proceedings these days are being recorded. You know, we're getting away from court reporters and we're getting into the area where they're being video. Now, in many instances, you know, that video is not readily apparent because readily available. Because if it was really readily available, then it would mean that any citizen at any time could do what we were talking about. That is, you could make a virtual visit to the courtroom from your computer. And so I think one of the trends that I think that we should be looking to try to bring about is all of that stuff is public record. So why wouldn't it be readily available for people to take a look at? Because that lends to transparency. Transparency, from my perspective, lends to better conduct, which necessarily leads to more fairness.
Yeah. I'm just curious about your thoughts about when you come to things where it might be a legal issue, but you might feel it's immoral. And thinking about many things that have happened in our past history. Slavery used to be legal. Women couldn't vote. It used to be legal. You know, African Americans not having civil rights used to be legal, but those were immoral things. And, you know, if people were just following the law, they might rule in one way, but then feel that there's something wrong with this.
Well, I think there's lots of decisions that we all make on a daily basis where you're saying, what the heck was the legislature thinking when they passed this stupid law? Okay? But it's the law. And what I'm saying is that sometimes, you know, you follow stupid laws because that's what the representatives of the people say should be the way that it goes, and they have the right to do that. Where it's a problem is when the law that you are asked to enforce conflicts with your moral compass. And at that point, you have a decision to make.
That's right.
And if you feel strongly enough that this is an immoral law that you could not abide and that you could not live with, then at that juncture, not only should you recuse yourself from that case, but depending on how many of those kinds of things are going to come in front of you, it might be time for you to seek another profession.
And that is one thing that you just brought up, that we do have the ability to recuse ourselves from a case. I don't think that I can be fair and impartial on this case for whatever reason. I mean, no one of the parties, a young lady that has spent the last 2 years in my mental health court. Now, they come to court every week. I develop a relationship with these people that is not the same as those that just appear in front of me once or twice. We have real relationships. It's a victim on a case. That case got assigned to me, and I said, no, I cannot hear it. I know what her life has been for 2 years, and she's told me things that would impact what I maybe signed up for. So I'm off of it. It took about half a second. And she very much understood, you're not going to hear this case. I went over here, I'm not. So we have that ability. And we use it when we need to. If we're conscious of it, and if we pay attention to ourselves, most of us are very honest about, we know there's going to be a bias here. Can we overcome it? Very often, yes. But what does it say to the public? What is the appearance? And if it looks like somebody's going to go, you know, I can't imagine they could overlook whatever the issue was, we're going to get off and we're going to recuse. Believe me, there's so many cases to go around that it doesn't become an issue.
Pick up the next file.
That's right.
We'll go here, then here.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Ernest Whitted, and yes, we came from Columbus. I'm spearheading a process for judicial endorsements with my organization to go ahead and endorse candidates, judicial candidates, either this year or next year, because we're going to start the process. We're looking at candidates with their body of work, their experience as well, and also where their money is coming from. What other questions do we need to be asking these candidates when it comes to judicial endorsements?
There's lots of questions. I don't know how much it's going to inform you. Okay. Take for instance the question of money. If you're talking about at the Supreme Court level, you're looking at Supreme Court cases, it's probably going to inform you a lot. Because the biggest donors at the Supreme Court level are people who have a vested interest in outcomes. And so you can take a look at that, you can track straight back between the level of the contribution and what may now be pending or what's likely to be pending before the Supreme Court. That's why there's been such a big, going back about maybe 10, 15 years, when money first really got to be an issue in Ohio with justice residence candidacy. It's been a big problem here. So you can do that there. When you get further down on the feeding chain, you get down to our level, and at the municipal court level, what you find is that the only people who are really interested, in contributing to our campaigns, sad to say, are lawyers. Okay? And you get family, okay? You have friends. But, people who are going to contribute are the people who say that, I know that I got to be careful because I want to see, I don't want my ox to be the one that gets gored, okay? And so you do that. But I would suggest to you, if you haven't looked at it already, in Cleveland, they have an outfit called Judge for Yourself. You should go online and take a look at Judge for Yourself. And they have an outline of all of the questions that they ask and the process that they go through, which I really think is a good process. There have been some people who disagreed with it and thought that it had some biases as it related to minority candidates. And I can understand how they came there, but there are fixes for some of that stuff that could fine-tune that and make it better maybe here in Columbus, okay? But the process itself is really a good process that I would recommend.
And that is written Judge, the number 4, yourself.org. Right?
Right.
This, you might need your insight. I really don't. I'm newbie to this, and I guess you mentioned that you teach a course for new judges. Do judges go through training? And if they're reprimanded, what kind of training or what sort of reprimands do you deal with? That would do a lot to, I think, increase the trust in people if they knew that you had some. Yeah.
Yeah, we have accountability. When you're elected to the bench, in the fall of the year that you're elected to the bench, you are required by the Ohio Supreme Court through the Ohio Judicial College to attend new judge orientation. That's where it teaches the course. And there's 2 sections to it. There's one in the fall, and then in the spring, after you had a little time on your bench, you go back for a second portion of that. You have to pick up 20 hours of continuing judicial education in a biennium. Okay. 40 in the biennium. And if a complaint is made against a judge to either a bar association or to the disciplinary council, then they will conduct an investigation. If it results in discipline being placed against you, it really just puts you on notice. If it's a reprimand, then the next time it's going to be suspension if there's a repeat or addition. If it is suspension, the next time it may be indefinite suspension. If it's indefinite suspension, the next time it's barred. And you can't be a judge if you aren't a lawyer.
Does this happen? Is this something that happens?
Yeah.
It does happen, yes.
Yeah, yeah. And the Ohio Supreme Court, if you go to Ohio Supreme Court's website, you know, you can see all of the disciplinary actions that the Supreme Court is taking against lawyers and judges.
So I'll defer to our organizers for today. I know we started a little late,
Why
but
don't we take two more?
okay.
Hopefully you can actually answer this question. I'm always looking for solutions of how do we help people make the connection of why it's important. That's usually driven by an issue that, you know, is moving me. So when I look at some police misconduct issues, whether it's been here in the state or it's been around the country, I see people, police officers making the decision to go to a bench trial versus a jury trial. There seems to be, I don't know, it's non-scientific, but there seems to be a bias that, you know, the police officers who have been repeatedly accused of misconduct get a fairer deal from their point of view from a judge versus a jury because there's a relationship, right? So when I look at, you know, you, Judge, are like being retired, you may be more able to have a conversation with some people about this is how you can use the system to advantage you to make certain that you understand it. Are there groups of retired judges who would be willing, or just individuals, just come and sit down and talk to people that it's not, you know, I'm in the court system right now, but I need to understand how it works and why it works so that I can make it accessible, not just to those of us in the room, but, you know, back in my church, back, you know, in my social group or whatever, because I think we just don't get it. But when it touches something that we care about, and we see these kind of things that look like trends to us, how can we get some real information? Because I may not want to go to an attorney because I might feel that attorney is going to be biased to get my money, you know, to support me or whatever the case is. You know, I'm just trying to figure out how do we make the connect and get it to where it can move to the next level of engagement and information. If there was even a question in there, I don't even
The short answer is that most judges were public servants while they were on the bench and continue to be, at some level, desirous of continuing to be engaged in the community after they retire. And if requested, are likely to come and meet with a group if that group is just seeking basic information about how the system, you know, works. Just a quick, to your point, you were talking about bench trials versus jury trials and why it seems that, you know, you get a better deal. The reason why somebody would take a case to a judge as opposed to a jury, generally speaking, is because of the fact that they think that the case will turn on legal issues more so than on factual issues. And they feel that if it goes to a jury, that the jury would be unable to see the legal issues because of the horrendousness of the facts. Okay? So that's why if I was a defense attorney, I would take a case to a judge as opposed to a jury. Now sometimes, truthfully speaking, candidly speaking, I might decide that I'm going to take a case to a judge because I know who that judge is.
Yes.
And I know what that judge's predilections are. Okay. That's the real world.
Yeah, emotionally charged cases like that, if you try it before a judge, the anticipation is you're going to be taking the emotion out of it and putting the law in it. And that's how you decide.
We have a final question. I'll go to the back, and this will be the last one. No pressure.
This might be a little off our subject, but we talked earlier in our group about trust and hope, and we're talking mostly about judicial processes today. We're also talking about politics. So my question is, and you may not have any personal that's an isolated case, and that's an isolated case, I don't know. But I'm still stinging basically from the governor in Virginia, who was charged with crimes, mostly with what his wife had done, Bob McDonald. And he was giving what I thought was a ridiculously light sentence of like 2 years. He was able to actually appeal that all the way to the Supreme Court and get his jail time tossed out. Here's a politician. We find that our politicians have done wrong, and we can't throw the book at them, or we can't at least treat them as a criminal if they've committed crimes. And then we turn right around, and now we have this governor of Missouri, who on a personal level is easy to figure out where he's coming from. And he's been charged with crimes that are unbelievable. And now we've been made aware, and I don't know what's the truth or not, and maybe we'll never know the truth, but he's not going to go to trial because they're not even going to charge him with anything, because he agreed to quit. So this business of these politicians seems like they're getting a better shape than the average citizen. Again, I don't know if you have any personal experience with that, but it's just very discouraging to an average person to see these politicians commit crimes and not really have to pay the same as possible regular citizens.
What's the question?
Why is that? What's your opinion? Do you think maybe that thing that happened in Virginia got nothing to do with Missouri, and maybe we're just all a coincidence? But it just seems like these politicians do these things, and then they quit, or they step back from public life, and they get their hands slapped, or they get literally nothing done.
You know, I don't have any personal experience with this, but what I will tell you is that it's the nature of the beast not to want to get down in the dirt and the weeds if you don't have to. If you don't have to spend 6 weeks or 6 months in a trial, you know, in a situation where you can get what you really want, which is to get rid of the bum, then a lot of prosecutors will take that way out because it's easier to them. I mean, it's really just kind of human nature to look at the easiest offering. Okay, doesn't make it right, but it explains it. That is that people will avoid situations that they think are going to make matters worse. And if that means that they can cut a deal, they'll cut the deal.
Great. Well, that concludes our lunchtime panel. I want to thank both Judges Morehart and Adrine for coming in today. Thank you so much. We'll get moving on to the next section.
And people promised me, speaking of human nature, right? This is bad. She's going to ask for something that's not going to happen. If you can take if everybody wants to take a short break, but literally, because we actually want to talk about now what we can do, we'd like you to come back in, say, 7:45, then that would be great.